Welcome to the campus of North Idaho College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we wish to welcome back Dr. Stephen Marks, who was with us last week from Munich, West Germany. He is a political scientist and a freelance writer. Last week we talked about the history of Germany and Adolf Hitler. Our subject this week is the U.S. military presence in Central Europe, and we are particularly going to address the issue of nuclear weapons. Dr. Marks, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Also welcome back to the panel from last week. First of all is Dr. Owen Cargill, who is the Dean of Instruction at North Idaho College. And then to my left is Steve Shank, who is the Director of Informational Services at North Idaho College. And then from the student body and on the first team of our debate program, Bob Holstein, who is also joining in the questioning. I'll invite Dr. Cargill to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. The topic of today's discussion is the U.S. military presence in Central Europe, and in particular the implications for the German people of having their country serve as a military base for the NATO alliance. The Federal Republic of Germany is about the size of Oregon and has approximately 65 million people, whereas Oregon has less than 2 million people. I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of the German perspective on how they view their country as a military base for the Western Alliance.
Indeed, we feel as being a military base. We have about 500,000 West German soldiers and British, French, Belgian, Dutch, Canadian soldiers, and more than 250,000 US soldiers, plus a lot of weapons. And there was a time after 45, of course, we were grateful to be freed from National Socialism. Meanwhile, there are more and more people in our countries who have doubts about this kind of defense, because it is not really a defense. Maybe. Should I go on with that? Would you like to have some explanations about that?
Well, perhaps you could explain to our audience why you view the Western military forces in the Federal Republic as not being so much a defense as a lightning rod for strikes from similar armaments in the German Democratic Republic.
Yeah. I want to speak about this map.
Sure, that'd be fine.
This map shows West Germany, and each of these dots represent a nuclear military installation, a missile depot, or a depot for nuclear warheads, or a place where Pershing II or cruise missile are deployed, etc., etc. 241 altogether. So nowhere else in the world so many nuclear weapons are deployed in such a density. So if the thesis is right, the more weapons, the more safety, then certainly this should be the safest place on Earth.
We just now got the map up on the screen. Would you point to those and show us what you mean?
I want to go into detail. All these green dots that you see here, like freckles all over the country, H1, H2, all these places. From all these places, nuclear warheads, nuclear bombs will be shot with cannons, nuclear artillery within a range of 12 plus minus 5 miles range. So this is about 12 miles. So you can see they will explode in our own country. L, the yellow dots here, there. This means from here, Lance rockets carrying nuclear warheads will be shot, range 95 miles. That's about this. N, the red dots here, there. Nike Hercules rockets, range 95 miles, carrying nuclear warheads too. So, out of these 7,000 nuclear warheads deployed in our country, about 2/3, about 5,000, will explode in our own country. This is so-called defense, defending us by blowing us up.
2,000 nuclear warheads 5,000 nuclear warheads would explode over Germany.
In the Eastern Europe, yes. And these 5,000 will explode in our own country. This is the official NATO strategy to defend us by killing us. Robert McNamara once said, the Germans must be aware that if they continue following the NATO strategy, their country will be completely destroyed. That's why we cannot perceive this as a defense. This is
a rather startling perspective. You suggest in the literature that you gave to the panel members earlier that the United States maintains more than 55% of its nuclear arsenal in the Federal Republic of Germany. Are Germans as aware of this in general as you seem to be?
55%, that meant the number of military facilitations that the U.S. maintain overseas in foreign countries, 55% are in West Germany. But still, the major part of military politics of the United States takes place in this country.
Are the general German populace aware of these kinds of statistics?
Many are. There are, of course, quite a few who say we don't want to look at this, we don't care, we trust our politicians instead of informing us. But many are, and this is what the peace movement accomplished in the last years, to educate the people that while 6 years ago most Germans just simply appreciated the nuclear military presence in Central Europe. Meanwhile, a big majority does not want these weapons. Still, they are there. It's sort of a situation like we compare it with Afghanistan. Afghanistan government called the Russians to come in. I call it an invasion, but still they were officially called. So our government called the Pershing II, for example, to come in, but the people don't like it. About 76% of our population does not want them. About 11% want them, and the rest of the people are not informed or don't care or don't have an opinion.
We suggest that the Afghanistan government is a puppet government for the Soviet Union. Are you suggesting that the government of the Federal Republic of Germany is a puppet government for the United
Sometimes
States?
I feel that way. Concerning this issue, of course, we cannot in general compare it. It's a different situation. But the majority of our people do not agree with this kind of defense.
Thank you.
Steve Shank.
If that's the case, if 76% of the population of West Germany opposes these nuclear installations in that country, why don't they simply vote in a government that will abolish their participation in the NATO alliance?
We have free elections. In the last election we had, both of the big parties wanted them. So we had free elections, but no choice. So there's a Green Party who opposes them.
That comment would suggest to me that what you're suggesting is that West Germany is not a democratic.
It is, but it's a matter of how to pick, what kind of issues you pick for the election campaign.
Maybe I should move on. It would be interesting to explore alternatives, but before I do that, I'd like to know your perception of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, how it came into existence, and why it is in West Germany.
NATO was founded in 1941 as a defense organization against the Eastern Bloc countries, which got together in the Warsaw Pact in 1955. 6 years later, was an organization planned to defend us against the Eastern Bloc nations and to prevent a war. Meanwhile, however, there's a major change in the strategy, and that's a paper which is, this is surprising, it's almost unknown in the United States, and it's widely discussed in Central Europe and created a lot of opposition. This paper is called Allen Battle 2000, described in the Field Manual 100-5. It's publicly available in every bigger city library. It describes how to fight in the future. While NATO still speaks about deterrence and avoiding and preventing war, this paper speaks about offensive first and massive use of conventional, chemical, nuclear and electronic weapons with deep strikes into the enemy's countries. While in the past there was still room for political solutions, now the accent is on offensive. And this is a major change, and I think we have to be very careful about that.
Do you think that the new philosophy of NATO then is a plan to stage a preemptive strike of the Warsaw Pact nations and the Soviet Union?
Let's say we have a strategy available which makes it possible, but
doesn't that suggest to you that and I don't like the thought of that either, but is it possible that that's an intellectual exercise? I mean, if in fact the NATO organization was planning a first strike of the Warsaw Pact powers, why would we talk about it and why would we publish it and distribute it in libraries?
That's maybe the advantage of a Western of a free society like ours, that you cannot prevent that papers are public, while you train soldiers with it and all this stuff. These are
Bob Holstein.
Okay, getting back to what Mr. Schenk was starting on, if both of the parties that you are electing into your government want the missiles in West Germany, then either they're not representing the 76% people that, or 76% of your populace that don't want the weapons, or the 76% is actually an inaccurate figure. How can
this
you
is a
justify
poll.
that?
The subject of an election is not defense politics or a nuclear question. All kinds of questions get together. So the last election we had 3 years ago was not, do you want the Pershing II and the cruise missile and the nuclear warheads? It was, do you want this party or that party, which includes all kinds of issues, economic issues, unemployment. We have big problems with unemployment at the moment.
Okay, but don't you think that if this was really a representative poll, that you would get somebody in the government that doesn't want these missiles? Wouldn't that be an issue in the campaign?
Should be, yeah. And it is for the Green Party.
Okay, and I assume you have Green Party members in your
Yes.
legislature, so why aren't they doing anything about
They
it?
do. But we're not in power.
Okay.
Dr. Cargill.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on Mr. Holstein's comments. Both the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats tend to be mainstream Western parties with their ideology, and of course the Greens Party is the more liberal group. But it does seem that the Greens Party certainly made a national campaign issue out of the nuclear weapons concern shared by many Germans, as well as ecology, foreign workers, and that they did have an opportunity to have a much broader appeal than what you might have seemed to indicate earlier. And while they did elect, I think, a number of representatives to the Bundestag, they did not get the majority of the votes. And so
it's hard for a small party who just starts to suddenly get a big percentage of voters.
do you anticipate that in the future the Greens Party will be able to outpoll the Social and the Christian Democrats?
Would be great, but would be a long ways to there. But I have a certain hope that maybe we could have a coalition government out of Greens and Social Democrats next year.
But there's also the conservative movement in Bavaria that seems to be attracting an equal number of votes as the Greens, but they seem to be closer aligned to the Christian Democrats and the conservative movement.
Steve Schenk.
Maybe we could move to the larger question of the extent of nuclear arms that exist in West Germany, and of course that invites the other question. You know, when is enough too much? And you can move on to that from that to what the alternatives are. But it might be a good time. I know you have a demonstration prepared for us.
If you don't mind, I'd like to leave that
You
to
want
the
to
end
see
of the
that?
program.
All right, fine. Then let me move back to an earlier concept. We've got a tremendous amount of nuclear armament in West Germany and all over the world. I think most people today who are informed on the subject realize that the nuclear weaponry exists in the hands of the United States, its allies, and the Soviet Union and its allies to destroy the world many times over. Many people in this country, I'm sure, would join in your feeling that it would be a wonderful thing if we could get both sides simply to destroy those weapons. What's the chance of that?
It doesn't matter the other side, both sides. See, they are not defending. These weapons do not defend. We speak about, when we discuss international politics, we speak about defense and deterrence. What does deterrence mean? Does it mean that one nuclear bomb here, does one nuclear bomb there disappear? Does a Pershing II shot here and meet the SS-20 shot here, do they meet in the air and neutralize each other, creating zero like plus and minus? It's not the case. They're both weapons of genocide. They kill people here and there, especially in such a crowded place as Central Europe. They don't defend. Let me point this out with the Pershing II, so-called defense weapon. It is not a defense weapon. We can use them. Let's assume the SS-20 attacks first. In this case, the Pershing II will be destroyed because, of course, Pershing II are number one targets. So the Pershing II will be destroyed on the ground, plus several 10,000 or 100,000 of Germans living in the environment. Pershing II are transported publicly through our towns and forests. So in this case, the defense effect is minus, negative, because Pershing II and people are dead. So it makes only sense as a first use weapon. So fire or lose. You have to use them first or you lose them. So this is offensive weapon. It's not a defensive thing. Einstein said, the nuclear power has changed the world. It's changed everything except our thinking. And this is exactly what we have to learn. There is no more such thing as defense. None of these weapons defend. And we spoke about strategy before. This sort of includes that we may have a bad guy, a bad president or whatever, who wants to push the button, who wants to defeat the Soviet Union. Okay, this is indeed this new strategy. However, the process of the evolution of weapon technology itself increases the threat.
Are you suggesting that what we ought to do then, as NATO powers, as the Western Alliance, is simply lay down our arms first?
Negotiate, get together, cooperate, all these things.
So you wouldn't suggest then that the appropriate demonstration of our resolve to end the threat of nuclear war would be to simply give up all our weapons unilaterally?
There are many steps we can take, of course. I think one step of our side will make the other side make a step too. Test ban, ban of chemical weapons, all these little steps to get together, creating trust, and then creating a central nuclear-free zone in Central Europe, enlarging it. There were plans about this, and I think there are ways to do it. The other way certainly is no more way to proceed.
Okay. I'm going to expand a little bit on Mr. Schenk's question. Would you like to see America pull out all of its nuclear weapons from West Germany?
Right.
Okay. Then what would stop the Soviet Union from simply annexing West Germany as they did to Latvia and Estonia?
They were not occupied. There were meetings of the Allies leaders at the end of the Second World War where they agreed that Eastern Europe would be part of the Soviet sphere of interest, and Western Europe would be sort of part of the United States.
Okay.
Western. Let me show this.
Okay.
In case of a Russian invasion, I don't share the assumption that the Soviets invade wherever they want. They were in Austria, for example, after the Second World War, and there was a contract, treaty between Austria and Soviets, and they removed. I don't share the assumption, but still, in case that, let's assume that the Russians do invade us, what happens? The United States will blow up West Germany. Okay, this map shows part of West Germany again. That's an area about 35 miles. And each of these black dots shows a nuclear explosion which will take place there within 90 minutes. So this is part of the plan to defend us. So this is what we can call a better dead than red strategy. I don't call this a defense. Everybody is free in case of a Soviet invasion to take a gun and commit suicide, but that's a very personal and important decision. I don't think our political leaders can make this decision for a whole nation without even asking the people.
Dr. Cargill.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. In the material you supplied to us, you indicate that there are 50 U.S. combat ships deployed in the Federal Republic, in addition to 1,800 combat aircraft and helicopters, 2,000 tanks, 150 missile launching pads, 500 cannons for nuclear artillery, and about 7,000 nuclear warheads. I think the idea behind having all this U.S. armament in Germany is to defend it against the Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies. You suggest that when these nuclear warheads go off, they're going to go off in the western sector. Are they not designed to leave their silos and go off in the east, or will they explode?
This is part of the reference book. This is how U.S. soldiers are trained to operate in Central Europe. It's not a slip of my tongue when I speak about that. That's a strategy to blow up West Germany, and they call this defense. I'm serious about that. So
these are not missiles that will go to the German Democratic Republic of Poland
this is West
or
Germany.
the Soviet Union. These are designed to blow up, to stop invading troops.
Right. So again and again, all your questions have to do with defense. And this is no defense concept. This is a suicide concept. This is a concept of better dead than red. So, sure, we can move them out. Yes.
Dr. Marks, in a pre-conference that we had prior to this program, you indicated to me something else that is of paramount importance, and that is the time period for the deliverance or the delivery of nuclear warheads from Europe to the Soviet Union, or even between the United States and the Soviet Union, has decreased dramatically, and we have less and less time to deal with possible eras. Would you explain to our audience how you see that as an increased chance of nuclear war?
Yeah, this is what I mentioned before, that without having a bad guy pushing the button here or there, the weapon technology itself, the way it evolves, increases the risk that the whole world explodes, is blown up accidentally. For example, the reduction of the warning time. Both superpowers have systems, detection systems, spies, radar systems, satellites, etc., etc., to collect information about what the other side is doing. To collect all this huge amount of information together, we need computers, supercomputers, both sides have. And the United States computer, for example, there were more than 100 errors in the years 81 to 85. So in the past that meant the American technicians, in case of an alarm, had 30 minutes time to find out if this was a real attack or a computer error. Now the Pershing II needs only 8 minutes. That means the Soviet computer technicians, in case of an alarm, only have 8 minutes time to find out if this is a real alarm or not, if we assume that the Soviet computers are not better than ours. And this time gets shorter and shorter. Another example is the cruise missile, who sneaks under the radar system and cannot be detected. So this old thing called balance, even though frightening, ceases to exist, and we're moving into something where computers make the decision and no more politicians.
So really you're indicating very vividly that as we get better and better technically and more precise on time, that we're actually greatly increasing the odds of an arrow that can't be checked out, and therefore the destruction of both countries, or maybe the world.
Yeah. Just comes into my mind, who is we? I think this increasing arms race, we can call it, one side tries to build up so many arms so that the other system collapses. This costs a high price to ourselves too. You can see it. I call this intensive war. In the past we had extensive war. That meant military of one nation was fighting against the military of another nation in order to gain territory. Now we're moving into time of intensive wars, meaning military of one nation is fighting against its own population. We could see this clearly in Uganda, Cambodia, El Salvador, Guatemala today. Soldiers making massacres against their own population. And I think in a way we could this makes sense to what is happening in Western Europe, Western nations too. Budget discussions, for example, the Pentagon wanting more and more money while their own population gets poorer and poorer. 1/5 of the US population, every 5th child in the United States grows up in poverty, farm crisis, unemployment. I would call this intensive war between Pentagon and the United States population.
Steve Shank.
There always seems to be an economic price that we pay. And obviously, I think, I don't have exact totals in mind, but I'm sure that the defense expenditure total between the United States and the Soviet Union is in excess of $500 billion and probably is approaching $1 trillion. So the incentive is there, no doubt about it, to try to achieve some limits on nuclear arms buildup. But I wonder, there also always seems to be groups who are more than willing to accept the largesse of the military-industrial complex, and I think that there is a large group in West Germany who defend the U.S. presence there on an economic basis. The cost to us, to the United States, for all the installations that you pointed on that map is enormous. What about that group in your country? What have they had to say recently?
First of all, you used defense again, used the word defense, and it might be interesting homework just to eliminate the word defense. Okay. What was the other question exactly?
Well, I am aware, I think, that there's a large group of some political force in West Germany,
yes,
and that there have been some surveys. We talked about surveys earlier. Surveys done in West German communities that have those bases that would suggest that those people are very much in favor of a continued U.S. military presence. And I think it's also important to point out that U.S. presence in Europe as a whole through NATO is at the invitation of those governments.
So that's
Sure.
a factor.
And it's
I wish you could pursue that, but I know something you want to do as a demonstration. We only have about 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So
We should go.
our guest is going to demonstrate, you can tell them what you're going to demonstrate
Yes.
concerning the noise difference between World War II and now and nuclear weapons. I also want to warn our audience that at one point the screen will go dark, and so it's not a technical problem with their screen. But Dr. Marks, go ahead.
Yes. I want to ask the audience to close your eyes. Just listen. The sound you heard represents the firepower of Second World War, including the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Try to remember or imagine images out of Second World War. 50 million people dead. The sound again. The firepower of Second World War. The sound you will hear now represents the firepower and the nuclear arsenals of both of the superpowers today.
With that, we must close our program, and please be with us next week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at this same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.